Corley Moore, spending a few minutes here at the beginning to talk about the Vigilantes. If you know me, you know I love this group. And if you are not already a Vigilante, you need to ask yourself why you are not. There are so many great things about being a member. You get the first look at the behind the scenes of the scrap. You get to have input on the future direction of the scrap. There are the Vigilante meetups, the Vigilante only swag shop, the merch discounts, the fireaways, the VIP forums, which are like scraps, but you get to log in and be involved on the screen talking to the person. It's great, man, and all the Vigilantes are invited. You get the files, you get the posts, you get the questions and the polls, but the best part, besides all of that stuff, the best part is that you get to belong to a community of like-minded souls. And when you have that, when you belong to a community of like-minded souls like that, man, it is powerful. Especially in this calling, especially in this profession. When you have that, you are never alone. So go to patreon.com/thevigilantes and join today. It's $5 a month. $5 a month. I used to say it's the price of a cup of coffee, but that's not even true anymore because you can't hardly get a cup of coffee for $5 a month. It's the best value in the fire service. So go to patreon.com/thevigilantes and go sign up today. Become a member of the Cool Kids Club. Come hang out. I look forward to seeing you there.
In the demanding world of firefighting, training against real-world scenarios is crucial. Yet traditional training facilities often fall short in providing realistic, versatile, and cost-effective training solutions. Affordable Drill Towers presents a groundbreaking solution. By positioning an affordable drill tower alongside your existing Connex box's burn buildings, a realm of realistic, multi-level training scenarios is unlocked. This integration has been adopted successfully by various fire departments, enhancing their training capabilities exponentially. Delve into the heart of live fire training scenarios within the Connex boxes, now amplified by the ADT's multi-floor access, providing an unparalleled training ground.
We started looking at Connex boxes about probably 10 years ago. To me, you can't beat them, especially for the price. The affordable drill tower was the same way. We've got 6 floors, we've got standpipes on every floor, we've got more anchor points than you can count, we've got removable floors, removable stairs. We can go into the second and third floor off the drill tower, so whether you want us to use it as an external stairwell or a high rise, we can do all that and mimic just about any type of situation that the members of the fire department might encounter.
Experience cost effectiveness, enhanced realistic training, versatile operations, easy multi-floor access, and innovative solutions to age-old training challenges. Take your fire department's training to the next level with affordable drill towers. Reach out to Affordable Drill Towers to elevate your training capabilities today.
Good evening, Robbie Fisher, Firehouse Vigilance, member number 5. This is the weekly Scrap 260. I'm your guest host. Surprise, everybody. I know we tried to push out a spoof video, and I think Steve picked it out right away, who was probably doing or what was going on. But so I'm your guest host tonight, and my guest is a good friend and a mentor of mine, Phil Jost. Chief Jost from Seattle Fire Department. Basically, you know what? When you've done scraps for 250 shows, 259 shows on a week, you've got to go and take a break. And Corley and Amanda were here at our house in early June for some vacation and working on a project. And this came up where they wanted to go on a family vacation. So the Moores and their kids are all in Europe right now, enjoying a little bit of the UK, and they're going to be going to Germany. And as this came down, Corley needed a couple of guest hosts. So I'm guest host number 1. So you guys got me tonight. So My guest, Phil Jose, retired deputy chief from the Seattle Fire Department. As deputy chief, Phil served in the training division as chief of training and ops division as a shift commander. He chaired the SOG and PIA committees. He was chief of the year in 2013, has been an FDIC instructor since 2004, and was awarded the 2008 Tom Brennan Training Achievement Award, which is a prestigious award. Phil has authored Instructor One for the Fire and Emergency Services from Clarion in 2023, a best-selling book, Air Management for the Fire Service through Penwell in 2008. He's participated in, I should say he did the chapter for SCBA's and Fire Engineering's Firefighter 1 and 2 handbook, and was part of the Bread and Butter series, video series for SCBA's with Fire Engineering. Phil currently lives in Pocatello, Idaho with his wife Trish, and teaches art of reading smoke, the next generation, and tactical decision making, both taught online and in person. Chief Jose, welcome to the show, my brother, as the guest of the Weekly Scrap 260.
Rob, thanks for having me, and I'm just so excited. LFG, brother, let's do it.
You already throw out the LFG. Anything I missed, or anything you want to add to your bio?
2 kids who I'm extremely proud of, Maria and Ian, both fully grown adults living their own lives now, so good for them. Contributing members of society, and nobody's in jail or on the pole, so I guess I must have done something right.
Yeah. So, and grandpa, and enjoying grandpa life and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I always say I'm semi-retired. I'm still doing stuff, but I have a lot of time to do things that aren't fire service related. But I always come back to my roots, which is I think I was born and bred to be an instructor, and I love teaching stuff, and I've been doing it a long time. So I don't know, maybe I'll figure out something else to teach eventually, but for now, reading smoke and tactical decision making seem to be what's filling most of my time.
Awesome. Okay, audience. Phil just said it. We plan to be talking about reading smoke, decision making, command, all things training. So get your questions ready for Chief Jose and myself. And before I cover anything else, and we get into the sponsors, because we got to get into the sponsors and do all the other scrap stuff. I'm not Corley Moore, so I'm not drinking a Modelo, but tonight I am drinking a Petite Syrah from Washington, and it's a 2013. So that's what's in the glass for me tonight. I don't think Phil's got a glass in front of him, but cheers to all of you that are out there in the land. So let's do these beautiful sponsors. The OG sponsor of the scrap, Key Hose. Check them out online, keyhose.com. Follow them on Facebook. Affordable Drill Towers. Well, they are on the mission to bring you cost-effective and versatile training props, like the affordable bailout prop, which allows you to practice window bailouts, ladder bailouts, and ladder high point rescues. They make the affordable standpipe prop, which can be rolled into the classroom for standpipe theory and then rolled out in the parking lot and pump realistic flows and pressures. And of course, their mainstay, the affordable drill tower. It comes with several configurations and comes standard with a standpipe system. Choose from 1 or 2 sets of stairs integrated into your existing Connex boxes for multi-story access or freestanding on a slab. All models are NFPA 1402 compliant and gain you ISO credit. The only thing you can't do on an affordable drill tower is live fire training. Call Steve at 844-55-TOWER or drop an email to info@affordabledrilltowers.com. FirestationFurniture.com provides complete line of quality furniture for your firehouse. Firefighter owned and operated. They understand and strain firefighters. They understand the strain firefighters put on furniture and offer furniture that is built to last. Visit www.firestationfurniture.com for more information. And lastly, Mid-American Fools OKC Metro. Now, this is dear to my heart, being a Fools e-board member. They've got the 2024 conference, Purveyors of Rogue Training. It's going to be this September 27th and 28th in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Registration is currently open. There's a link on registration at the Mid American Fools OKC Metro Facebook page. You can check it out there. So let's just see what's going on in the chat. We got a lot of LFGs, which is great. Let's see. I went from Modelo to Merlot. Yes, we did do that. We all deserve a vacation. A big question they want to know is Corley in the chat. We don't know. We don't even know what time it is there. Um, everybody is what's up. Timestamp that, Joe. I don't know why we're timestamping something. So it's going to be a good show. Good show. Truckies don't read as well as what I guess. And I know Phil was on a truck for a long time, so maybe we'll get into some truck stuff. So we've covered everything. Let's get into the show. Phil, where do we find you tonight? And how's your summer going?
Oh man, summer's been great. Just got back from Washington. Spent 2 weeks with my daughter, and my grandson. Went and played disc golf last night. Played pickleball yesterday and this morning. The weather's been crazy every night. Just as we were setting up, the clouds move in and the rain and the lightning starts. This small town we live in, Rob. It's I had turkeys, I had wild turkeys in my yard this morning, and so there was the lightning storm last night sparked a wildland fire, burned 350 acres in less than an hour because I think the wind was clocked in around 60. So right behind my house is a wash that goes down. It's got all these big junipers and stuff. I built a sprinkler zone that does nothing but spray out into the wilderness on the edge of my house that I can activate by my phone when I get a notification, right? So it's definitely different than living in Washington, but it's a fun place to be. We're very close to my in-laws. My wife's parents, they're about a mile from us, and her brother and sister live here. I actually grew up in Idaho Falls, which is only about 50 miles from here. So I lived in this area till I was about 12 years old.
Okay, well, I mean, this leads right into one of the first questions I had for you is like, kind of what drew you into the fire service, or did somebody draw you into the fire service, and what were you doing before you became a firefighter?
Yeah, so I was in school to be a computer engineer in 1983, 84. Probably if I would have stuck with that, I'd be independently wealthy for now, right now. But I wouldn't have gotten to break as many things. So my brother Dave, he's my next oldest brother. I have a big family. I have 9 sisters and 5 brothers, and I'm the youngest. So my next oldest brother went into the fire service. He was a volunteer, resident, that sort of thing. Asked me if I wanted to play volleyball. And I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." He said, "Well, you have to go to this academy for 2 weekends, and then you can be on the team because you'll be a firefighter." I was like, "Yeah, sounds good, right?" So 32 hours of training, which is, you think about it nowadays, that seems like it might be a slightly inadequate, but that's what I had. 16 hours one weekend, 16 hours the next. Got my bunkers and my pager, and I went to one fire, Rob, and that was it. Like I had already planned to go back to school, and I had my dorm room and all that stuff, and that all just ended that night, and I completely changed course. Started taking every class I could. Got my EMT. Was living in a fire station. Working or volunteering, right, for a 3-platoon rotation at Central Kitsap Fire and Rescue, which was Fire District 15 at the time, and just taking every test that came my way, until the citizens of Seattle gave me an opportunity, and I got to work for that department for over 30 years, and everything I own, everything in my life is credited to the citizens of that city and what they gave me.
Yeah, I think when you look at today, trying to get hired in the fire service today, I won't say is easier, but the competition just seems to be different because you got hired in '87, and I was testing in '88 is when I first started testing, and it was brutal to try to get hired, especially in the region that we were in, and so it's difficult. It was difficult back in those days to get hired. Um, So you came on the job in 1987. Seattle Fire Department experienced 6 line of duty deaths early in your career. So in July of 1987, there was the Crest Apartments. It was an arson, and a firefighter was lost there. In September of 1989 was the Blackstock fire. Lieutenant was lost in that fire. I remember that one because I was heading to the academy at the end of that month, and so it was like a huge impact to me how real this job is. And then in January 1995, there was the Mary Pang fire, which is probably the most popular one, or the most notable one that most people outside of the city of Seattle are going to know, where 4 firefighters were killed in an arson fire set by the son of the Pang family. So my question to you is, what were your positions at the time when these incidents occurred, when these fires occurred, and these firefighters were lost? And what impact did it have on you moving forward in your career?
So the Crest Apartment fire, where Bill Meredith died, that was actually 1 month before I came in the organization, and I passed all of the background check. I mean, it was on track to get hired. I had my letter for my start date. I had given my notice at my previous position, which I was working for the Navy at that time, and I didn't really. My parents were both passed away by then, right? So I had my brothers and sisters, but I didn't have I had no responsibility outside of myself, and so I really didn't think about it in those sorts of terms, right? I was so excited to have this job opportunity that I never really thought about it in terms of how much risk it would be. Um, and then, so when I was in drill school, they were doing all the investigation, all that. And of course, I'm completely separated from that as a recruit. Rob, you've been on both ends of that, right? As the drill master and as a recruit. And when you're in that zone, like nothing matters to you but recruit school, eating, and sleeping, right? But the first shift where I was in the companies, right? So we graduate recruit school, start in the companies, go to my assignment at Station 13 up on Beacon Hill. At that time, it was an ERS unit, right? So it was a staffed 1 in 5, so 1 officer, 5 firefighters, and that's a whole set of interesting experiences working on that rig, because ERS units were sent to every fire in the city. And so it's a great place to be assigned out of drill school. I mean, just so fortunate, right? But the first day they said, hey, you're going on a fire watch, and it was down at the Crest Apartment building. So firefighter, from Station 2 picked me up at the station. We drove to the Crest Apartment building. He parked the car, hopped in the back seat, and said, wake me up at 4 o'clock, or if the deputy chief shows up. And I was like, it's midnight. I'm like, okay, right? So I just got out, started walking around the building, and full circle that fire, when we were doing some of the research for air management stuff later, right, 2004, 2002, I found a video of that fire in the archives of the department, including them bringing Bill out and CPR, and I could see the looks on the faces of the people that I now knew. Right, I didn't know anybody at the time that video was taken, but by the time I saw it, I had really good relationships with some of those people, and just seeing the look on their face was pretty emotional for me. The Blackstock fire, where Matt Johnson was lost, I was fortunate enough to have his son Ben Johnson in recruit school when I was the training chief there, right? So another sort of full circle moment. But another arson fire, and then the Mary Pang was probably the most pronounced for me, just because that was my district, right? I wasn't there that night. My company, Ladder 3, they were there that night. The captain shift was there. In fact, when the floor collapsed, Ladder 3 was assigned to 2.5, and they went in. The crew under Captain Childs went right up to the edge of the precipice, right? They were right where the floor was missing. That's where they advanced to before they were eventually called out. I had worked with Randy Turliker like 2 days before that. I'd been I just have personal relationships with those people. Uh, Jim Brown came from the hometown that I had which was Port Orchard, right? That's where he lived. We were volunteers together, right? So really well connected to that group of people, and with enough time in that it was, pretty poignant for me. 4 funerals in 5 days, and that whole shoot match. And fast forward, right? By the time I leave the organization, less than half of the people that were in the Seattle Fire Department were there when that situation occurred, right? When the fatalities occurred, right? So fast forward to now, 4 years later, there's another 250 or 300 firefighters. So, the mass of the Seattle Fire Department, as is true of probably most fire departments, have no personal understanding of the devastation that type of incident has on an organization. And in many ways, the positive changes that came out of that were far reaching over decades, right? So I'm kind of waxing melodramatic, but there's a lot of good stuff that ended up happening as a result of those situations. Not that it was worth the price paid, but at least we gained some value.
Well, with that, I got 3 questions, and so I'm going to skip to the second one because it's kind of looks like I maybe have 4 questions. But the second question kind of ties into what you just said, and it's from Brad Whalencourt. Sorry. What was the most influencing change you've seen in the Seattle Fire Department regard to tactics and strategies and decision making? So it's kind of tying into that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happened while I was there is we moved from 3-person to 4-person staffing, and that was a big impact on the organization. I mean, there's the training aspects, the learning aspects, learning how to deploy, um, you know, trying to follow the state law that was in place at the time, and all those sorts of things. That was a pretty big change, a big change for the organization too, because of how many people we had to hire. Right? I mean, we were just chunking people through drill school. That's right around the time that I first went back to training as a lieutenant, and we're doing recruit classes of 40 and 40 and 30, right? And just pumping people out to the company. And so the organization gets younger, the tactics, while the stretching lines and stuff, that stuff is still the same. Your ability, once you have 4 people arriving versus 3, right? It just changed the way that we did things. I would say that the air management piece was a piece that was a big change, that I had a hand in. There's no doubt that there was a lot of influencers there. We had 4 near fatalities, and in I think 9 or 10 months, if I remember correctly. And when I say near, I'm not being melodramatic. One of them was brought out in full respiratory arrest. Like, one went out a 3rd floor window. Right? We're talking about serious incidents, all right after the other, that bred the theory and the practice of all the stuff that came from the air management piece of the puzzle. And that led into the change in the SCBA from a 30-minute cylinder to a 45-minute cylinder, right? Those sorts of impacts, reach far, but they start in that same place of just trying every single day to figure out a way to make the organization run better, because that's your oath. That's what you swore to do. And so you have a responsibility to do so.
And I would even say that it probably extended out into today, where you got the 5.5 bottles that are in between the 30-minute bottle, the 45-minute bottle type system, where it's had a huge impact in the American Fire Service. Your guys' book on air management.
Well, thanks, Rob. And like my partners, Mike Galliano, which everybody on here knows that name, I'm sure, Casey Phillips and Steve Bernoco. But Mike's running the suicide coalition now. He's the president of that organization. That's a big move on their part to reduce. I mean, fire smoke has cyanide in it. There's just no doubt about it, right? In addition to CO and a bunch of other stuff, but just trying to help firefighters. Look, I'm not saying firefighters need to be as safe as possible. What I want them to do is complete the mission the most effective way, right? And the way that you can do that over the course of a 30 or 35 or 40-year career, or even 20 or 10 or 15, is to not breathe smoke, right? The less smoke you breathe, the more likely you are to be successful in completing the mission. It's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great to see that Mike was basically became I think he's the president now of the Air Coalition. And running that. Yeah. So it's really cool. Fireman 718 has a question for you. Out of all the fire service topics, what drew you to smoke reading?
My friendship with Dave Dodson. I started teaching. We were fortunate to get the opportunity to teach at the national level once we started the air management stuff. I mean, Harvey Eisner gave us a big break to go on and teach hands-on at Firehouse. Fire engineering invited us, and we went to our first our FDIC in 2004 and had a room of like, I don't know, 275 people or something. They're just, a shocking number for a kid from Idaho Falls, Idaho, right? Like, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. You just don't even realize, like, how do you end up there, right? So opportunity, right? Just to get that chance. And as we look at that, and now I've forgotten your question, Rob.
What drew you to
Oh,
basically taking on?
Yeah, the reading smoke. So I met Dave there. I'd already been to his class a bunch of times, and we taught some classes together at FDIC, and we just became really fast friends. You're seeing each other at conferences, and it's nice to see a friendly face and all sorts of things. And as Dave headed towards retiring from the road, right? He'd been retired from the fire department, but then he taught full time on the road. He created the safety officer position for the American Fire Service, essentially, too, right? So he's teaching safety and he's teaching reading smoke, and he's on the road more than I am. And he asked me if I would be interested in doing it, and I got to tell you, Rob, at first I was taken aback. I wasn't sure I wanted the responsibility. And then I thought about it for about 2 more seconds and went, what's wrong with you? Because I had learned the curriculum, I had practiced the curriculum, and I had used it effectively as a company officer, as a chief officer, and then as an incident commander. So in Seattle, all chief officers are incident commanders occasionally, but the deputy chief is definitely taken over when there's a major incident, right? So as a battalion, you're getting moved forward quite a bit. You're getting moved up to Division 2 or up to the roof. You're getting moved into a forward tactical position, is the way the Seattle Fire Department uses battalion chiefs. And so successfully, right? Successfully meaning the incident went super well and everything was hunky dory and all that stuff. And then there were a couple times where it's like, hey man, I'm pulling the plug on this thing, right? It's over. And that ability to read smoke and understand what's going on inside the building, in combination with understanding the rhythm and flow of my organization, what normal sounds like, what the fire ground looks like when things are going well, what it sounds like on the radio when things are going, when it's popping, Rob, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's nothing like that machine when it's running like that. And it gives you so much confidence as an IC, but as you know, not every incident is running that smoothly. I would argue if I'm the deputy chief in the city of Seattle, if I'm doing everything right in my leadership with my battalion chiefs, if they're doing everything right with their captains and their lieutenants, and we're all pulling the same direction, you don't need the deputy chief more than once a year. Of all the fires, each deputy chief is probably going to have one fire a year where they earn all their money. And when that happens, you earn all your money. Trust me on that one, right? But most of the time, if you're stretching lines and forcing doors and putting up ladders and talking about tactics and understanding apparatus positioning, if you're doing all that stuff all the time, in addition to the EMS work, in addition to the personnel problems and the complaints and all those other things, but if you're focused, if you maintain your focus on those basic skills, you will be successful most of the time. And occasionally you'll need somebody to come in and go, stop doing that, or do it this way instead, or whatever that thing is that the deputy chief has to do to influence the outcome.
Yeah. I'd say, I mean, going back to the art of reading smoke with Dotson, like that was, I probably took that class at least 3 or 4 times when Dave was teaching it, and it blew me away the information that I was able to bring in, especially being typically assigned to the ladder truck and looking at the building from the perspective of a ladder officer versus an engine officer. And no, no issue. I'm not going to get into any debate on either side, but how I looked at a building was different than the way that the engine officers looked at a building. And being able to read smoke or being able to understand that more was incredible. And the thing that always blew me away was I'm surprised this you like that blew me away. um, I'm surprised that this hasn't become part of standard curriculum for firefighters. It's getting better with UL stuff, and we're starting to understand the impact of smoke and all these different things. And but it just never really became part of the curriculum, and I wish it would have, because I think it's, if you haven't had the art of reading smoke by Phil or by Dave Dotson back in the day, or Rob Backer is the other one that teaches it. If you haven't had that class, I highly recommend you take the class. Um, Stephen Kaiser's got a question along the lines. He's like, how do you tackle the difference in terminology when it comes to describing the differences in backdraft, flashovers, fire gas ignitions, etc., across the country and beyond?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, Rob, looking at all those things. Like, and what I was trying to look at was, is there an accurate, are there accurate predictors, right? I mean, really accurate. There's some things you go, well, it might occur if this is going on, or it might occur if this other thing is going on, or it might occur if this other thing, but then you'll find a video where none of that stuff's happening, right? I've got a couple of videos where there's virtually no sign on the outside of the building it's even on fire, and they have a smoke explosion, right? So when I'm thinking about it from a curriculum and a learning standpoint, what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to communicate it to an audience. And I'm a big believer in visual learning for reading smoke, right? So in an 8-hour day, I'll probably use 8 or 10 PowerPoint slides, and the rest will be analyzing video and watching fires and saying, here's what this means, here's what it looks like, here's what it means, here's how you can interpret it, here's the same thing from a different building, right? So that's what I was looking for, and I quite frankly have not found it yet. And then I start to go, okay, what are the distinguishing characteristics that I'm trying to figure out? If I'm there, what am I trying to figure out? And what I'm trying to figure out is what's likely to happen. So I always explain it, right? When you arrive, right, you go right with your parking brake, and there's some period of time before you're going to take action. And let's just define that action. The first most important action is to get water, right? So you're going to set the parking brake, and then at some period of time, you're going to go open the nozzle, and you're going to start doing something about the fire. And it's critically important that you're good at understanding what's that period of time for your organization. And this is where we get to, how much do we stretch hose? How good are we at stretching hose? How effective are we? Right? I mean, I could pull up 100 videos probably right now where people are stretching, and the line, when it comes to the door, it's at a 90-degree angle. So as soon as they go through the door, they're going to get laid down, right? They're going to have to pull that hose around the corner instead of being in line with the door, right? So all of that stuff matters, so that when you pick the right place, you effectively get the right weapon 1.75 inches, 2.5, 2 inch, whatever your set of weapons are for your organization, and you get that thing pointed at the enemy and you get it open and you're effective. And so the two things that are going to precipitate some sort of rapid fire progress come down, in my mind at least, come down to two items. One is the fire at or near flashover? And if it is, that's one checkbox, right? The You could have some version of rapid fire progress. Might be just a conflagration, might be a detonation, might be right. It kind of doesn't matter. You should expect that it could occur. The other one is, does the fire have access to ventilation? If it does, right, if whatever stage the fire is in right now, if it has, let's just say it's not incipient, right, it's grown some, if it has access to ventilation, you should expect that it's going to grow quickly. Rapid fire progress is possible because it has access to ventilation, right? So either one of those can precipitate a rapid fire progress event of some magnitude. If you have both of them together, you're basically, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but I watched a lot of fire video, Rob. I've yet to see a situation where both of those boxes are checked and things didn't get bad in a hurry. And so I'm a big believer at applying water to the seat of the fire as fast as possible. Right? You want to know where the fire is, you want to know where it's going, and you want to get there as quickly and effectively as you can. With the givens that you got to mask up, you got to have your gear on, you got to have a line stretch. Somebody's got to be doing something about getting that water in that hose. Right? All, to me, my mind, those got to be given, and you as the decision maker have to understand, this is the operational pace of my organization. This is how many people we have. This is how fast we can do things. This is how, it's totally different if you're in the city of Seattle and I've got 4 people every minute, right? Essentially, as long as I keep calling them, I'm going to get 4 people every minute for the next 30 minutes. Fully trained, fully staffed, ready to rock and roll. In my mind, no fire department better in the world than those people in the Seattle Fire Department. That's where my heart is, right? It's completely different. The city I live in here in Pocatello, right? There's 5 fire stations. There's 3 engines with 3 people on them. There's a couple of ambulances with 2 people on them. The one out at the airport has one. There's one guy there, right? I was teaching reading smoke here, and I said something about a second alarm. The guy's like, "Hey, we don't have a second alarm." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "The next city's got a population of like 8,000, and it's 40 minutes away. And the next one after that's by fire engine is like an hour and 20 minutes, right? There is nobody here, right? Their second alarm is people coming from home, right? And staffing the rig. So these mental models, you got to know what's going on in your place. But the 2 check boxes that you're looking at is at or near flashover, access to ventilation. Those are going to be the 2 keys that should tell you, wow, like we got to be on it here, Johnny. We got to be Johnny on the spot. There's no effing around, right? LF, brother, right now, right?
Yeah, that it should.
That's
I
how
mean,
I
if you, yeah, if you have a fire that is potential for being able to get ventilation and you don't have water on it, obviously that you should expect that there's going to be a fire event occurring without that. And this leads to my next question. And one of the cool things I think is happening in the American Fire Service is we've gotten better with quicker water. And I'm not taking a position of, hitting it hard from the yard type stuff. But I think the fire service, the American Fire Service, is getting better at being able to know when we need to do an exterior hit, but just getting water on the fire quicker. It's being supported. But the question from Kevin is, Chief, explain to the scrappers the importance of quick water and the mission.
The mission is to save lives, right? I mean, how you feel about anything does not matter. How you feel about things does not matter at all, right? What is the most effective way to get water on the fire, get the fire under control, get the gases out, and get the place searched, right? The purpose of putting water on the fire is to save lives, right? So, uh, you know, we can have this debate all day and all night. If I'm on the A side of the building and there's fire blowing out the floor 2 alpha side window, I want you to hit it before you go in. Why? Because from the time you go through the door, get up the stairs, make a 180-degree turn, and get back to that window, even if you're jacked and racked, is 30 to 45 seconds. I'm just telling you, Rob, if my grandson is laying on the threshold of the open door of that room, I would rather you do something about that fire right now than waiting 45 seconds. Now, I don't want you out there for 3 minutes. I don't want. We're not staying out there forever, man. You know, if your partner's not ready and you've got a charged line, you should do something about the fire. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, right? Now, there's plenty of times if that same fire is on the Charlie Delta in the city of Seattle on floor number 2. You know what's the fastest way? Is through the front door and up the stairs. Don't tell me you're stretching around the back and you're going to hit it from the Charlie Delta and you're going to go through the fence and past the recycle bins and all that. No, right? And I don't care how you feel. I don't care what your ego says. I don't care what your helmet color is. I don't care about any of that stuff. You know what I care about? The mission. What's the most effective way to abide by the oath that I swore with my right hand in the air to protect those citizens to the best? In the Seattle Oath says, to the best of my ability, right? And that's what I'm focused on. So, you know, it depends, right? How many, like you show up, if I showed up, I mean, if I'm in like Burley, Idaho, right? All volunteer organization, I show up there by myself. Am I going to be putting water through the outside? You bet I am, as fast as possible. If I show up with an army where I can stretch a line outside and inside at the same time, am I going to do that? You bet I am. Why? It's the best way to complete the mission, right? So the only time I ever have struggles with this is like as soon as I start having this discussion with somebody and I get the sense that what we're talking about is their ego on the subject, I'm out, because it just doesn't matter to me, right? I've seen enough and experienced enough that like these, you know, if you will not consciously take an extra 15 seconds to get out of the fire station, you should not consciously take an extra 15 seconds to open a line. And that clock is ticking, man. From the time that fire starts until the time you do something about it, that clock is ticking, and you just don't know. And that's why, like, you know, getting in there to search, man, the best thing I can do with the truck is just get the engine out of my way, right? Get them to the top of the stairs, get them wherever they need to go with their hose, and then I'm off, right? If it's a floor 1 fire, as soon as they get past the door far enough for me to get up the stairs, I'm gone, right? You know why? I trust that they're going to do their thing and I need to do my thing. I'm not going to wait around and are they going to get it out? Yeah, they always have before, right? I've had to jump, I've had to come out of the second floor because they had problems, right? Find a door, close it, find a window, right? I mean, you got to be smart about this stuff, right? You can't just be egoing your way around. You gotta look at what's happening, and you gotta know how to do things, and you gotta practice all the time, right? And then when push comes to shove, to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I think you basically got to pin that fire down as quickly as you possibly can. It's almost like active shooter situation, that your angle of approach and where where the incident is, the fire's location, all of those things, the delay to get to that floor, all of those things. But the sooner I can get on the floor where the fire is active and I can start pinning it and pushing it back, then that's when we're winning. And if we can't do that because the fire is so big on a floor or multiple floors, we have to hit it from the outside to make it so that we can have some ground to be able to base our attack from. And I think it goes back to the other thing was when you were talking about the engine not getting the fire, and you guys, is that goes back to what you said earlier. When everybody's doing their job, from the DC that's commanding the fire, when everybody's doing their job all the way down the line, you're gonna have a successful fire ground. It's gonna be really good. So um, we're going to go back to some auto reading smoke stuff too.
Cool.
Bo wants to ask, when it comes to reading smoke, although volume, velocity, color, and density all play a part, would you consider one more or less important? More specifically, color. It's brown, so it's structure, etc. Those types of things.
Yeah. So yeah, volume, velocity, density, color, all they each have each of those attributes has some things that it's going to tell you about the fire, right? And even if we look at the color, we go like there's even some of the textbooks that are still out there, they're starting to fade out because it's so long ago. We'll talk about you can know what's burning by what color the smoke is. It color sets a stage. That's the stage of the fire. Early stage heating is white. Late stage heating is black. In the middle somewhere is brown if you have unfinished lumber, essentially in a residential environment. You can get a little bit of brown for a short. When I say a short window, I'm talking about a temperature window from OSB, a very small temperature window. But in the say 350 to 450 range, I'm also not pulling out a micrometer to measure these temperatures, right? I just want to have this sense of what's happening, right? And so people, it used to be like, oh, brown means the structure is being impacted. Yes. If you have black smoke, let's say you have brown smoke coming out of the attic vent. Yep, the attic's warm. It's 350, 450. You got black smoke coming out of that same vent. Now we're in excess of 450, right? So it's not the fact, it's the fact that the smoke's coming from that space and what color it is. I focus a lot of the day, so I cover all four attributes. We talk about the science. We do that by watching different videos for different reasons, right? But I do focus a lot of the day on velocity and density. Velocity is going to tell you where the fire is now, right? The highest velocity is closest to the seat of the fire. If we take that one step further, say the highest velocity from the most restricted opening is closest to the seat of the fire. Okay, so this is where volume can actually be a distractor, right? I can look at a house and there's an open window and there might be a lot of smoke coming out of it, right? But the next bedroom over with the window closed, there's not much smoke coming out, but it's screaming out around the edges. Well, guess what? That's higher velocity, which means that's probably my fire room. I can be distracted. And in fact, if you looked at it, here's a fire to look at: the Stilt Court fire, STILT, the Stilt Court fire. I think that was in Sacramento or West Sac, and they had open windows. Right? They thought the fire was coming from floor 2 because there was open windows. There was a lot of volume. Turns out the fire was on floor 1, and had some fellas get pretty badly injured there, right? Because of the distractor of the high volume of smoke. So highest velocity. So when you're looking at a fire building and you want to know where the fire is right now, look for velocity. Now I can back that up with the science, right? The highest velocity is a visual representation of how much energy the smoke has. The smoke has its most energy at the seat of the fire because that's where the energy is created. As soon as the smoke leaves the fire, it starts transferring its energy through radiation, convection, and conduction. Right, we're right back to firefighter 1. Right, we're right back to our firefighter 1 curriculum. It starts transferring energy into the box. Right, so the smoke becomes cooler as it moves away from the fire. As a box, say a fire room, gets to the point where it cannot absorb any more energy and it starts to reflect that energy, it transfers the velocity So now we have turbulence, right? It's coming out of there boiling, angry, all of those sorts. Those are all velocity related terms, right? So the highest velocity is closest to the seat of the fire. If you have multiple openings, you want to look for the highest velocity from the most restricted opening. Door, closed door versus open door, closed window versus open window. If I look at the side of a building, I mean, we were at one in Capitol Hill, where on the right side of the building, the smoke was shooting down out of the, it's coming straight down from the fascia in the attic. Right on the right side of the building, it was shooting straight down 3 feet. On the left side of the building, it was shooting straight down about 2 inches. Well, guess which side the fire is on, right? That's where the most energy is, right? So where the fire is now, highest velocity. Okay, density is telling you the future. Where you see a lot of density, you can go watch there's plenty of fire videos. Go to my YouTube, just go out and look at them on your own, right? Where you have a lot of density, there's that the density is how thick the smoke is, how many molecules in there. It's a visual representation of how much fuel there is, right? Smoke is fuel, lots of fuel, high density, right? Thick smoke. Now it's transferring a lot of energy because it's so thick. And if you're seeing it, it's transferring it from the area where the fire is now to the area where you can see it. And wherever you can see it coming out, that's also known as a ventilation point, right? So there's ventilation available there. Eventually, the right temperature, right mix is coming your way. So if you can quickly identify where it is and you know where it's going, now we can talk about how to interject in between that process, right? And we can start by putting water right on the seat of the fire from exterior, interior. We can go inside, cut off where the smoke is flowing to, and then get water. But it's all just knowing where is it now, where's it going, some idea of how long it's going to take to get there, and then how does the operational pace of your organization, what's the best way, the most effective way to impact this fire in this building right now. And I hope I'm answering these questions, Rob. I'm just going.
No, awesome. Corley would say beautiful, but I'm the awesome guy. So yeah, that was awesome. Kind of staying with everything. There's a couple questions that are on here. Got to back.
Really bad.
How about now?
Still there.
I don't know why.
What do you want me to do, Sam?
Cannot adjust on my end.
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yes. I can hear me.
Because I've unplugged my headphones and now I'm just using my mic.
Yeah, it's really bad.
I'm gonna turn off my sound then. All right. I can't hear myself. But can you hear me without any echo?
No, the echo's still there. It's still rough.
Okay, that's not good.
Well, you got that fuzziness coming through too that you had before we started. Hey, Rob, why don't I go in? Did you have whose question were you going to ask? I'll just go into the chat, pull it out of there. I can hear you.
It's going to be James Platt.
James, where's James? He might have been a minute or two ago. Oh, there he is. There's James Platt. Pretty sure what his answer is going to be for question number 5. Oh, that's probably not what we're looking for from James.
has separating significantly changed the way of petroleum-based products go for our homes and businesses?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, James. I mean, it's a great question. I wouldn't say this. I would say what we have to understand is so one of the points I make. When Dave Dodson was teaching the curriculum, when he created the curriculum, it started with smoke is fuel, right? So even though I've mentioned that a couple times, that's really the baseline: is that smoke is fuel, and understand that when you're looking at smoke, you're looking at fuel, and that fuel is connected to the fire. And then we could talk about the attributes of smoke and how we can understand that connection and all those sorts of things, right? But the next thing in the curriculum was that the fuel had changed. And when Dave first started teaching it, right, in the 90s, he's teaching firefighters who came in the 80s and 70s. I mean, I even worked with some guys who came in the 50s, right? The 1950s for all you Gen Xers, right? And so, or the Gen Zers, right? I worked with guys who came in the 1950s, no problem, right? And guys who had their, 30, 35-year careers, etc. So for that group of firefighters, it was true that the fuel had changed significantly. It went from being wood, wool, and cotton to being essentially plastic, right? So then another thing has changed in the American, at least in the American culture, is that everybody has a lot more stuff than they used to, right? I mean, I love my grandson, and I'm as bad as anybody at this, but he's 3. He's got more toys than I had my whole life, right? And they're all made of plastic, right? So we have everything's made of plastic: the furniture, the couches, the kitchen countertops. Essentially, a lot of times are made of plastic now, right? And if it's not plastic, it's small pieces of wood held together by plastic. Then we have a lot more stuff, and we have a lot bigger spaces, right? Even the town that I live in now, Pocatello, houses that were built in the 20s and 30s and 40s, right, down in the flatlands, roughly 12 to 1800. A big one might be 2,000 square feet, 2,200, right? That was like a mansion when those houses were built. The house that I moved into, it's 5,000 square feet, right? And so, and the spaces are huge, right? The rooms, I mean, some of the rooms, I mean, it's weird here. I have an average size house for my neighborhood, right? And my only requirement was that we wanted a view. And you can't buy a view in this town without buying a big house. That's just all. 6 bedrooms is normal here. It's Idaho. What are you gonna do, right? But the rooms are huge, right? And they're filled with stuff. So the thing for the modern firefighter to know is that this is your world, and you should not be surprised. You should not be surprised when you pull up at a fire and you go, wow, that thing is a monster. Yep. And it got to be a monster in 4 minutes. Used to take 20, right? Now it takes 4. I mean, towards the end of my career, there were plenty of fires that like I pulled up to and I was like, wow, right? There were several. When I came out of the barn as a deputy chief one time, I looked at the column in the sky and I was like, I mean, like, how did it get that big before they even told me it was here, right? I'm ready to call second alarm as soon as I can get out of the pedestrian zone by headquarters, so I don't run over somebody. Like, it's because I'm driving myself. But by the time I can even get the first 5 blocks to where I have some room where I can pull the radio and call the second alarm, nobody's even there yet, right? If you go back 30 years, a company officer would never call a multiple alarm. Never, never, ever, ever. You weren't even allowed to call a multiple alarm fire if you were a company officer. Only chief officers could call multiple alarm fires, and they never did it. They avoided it like the plague, right? Well, that might be okay if everything in the house is wood, wool, and cotton, and people have a husband and wife share a closet that's 8 square feet, right? But in the modern era, you have to understand that this stuff grows fast, and it's going to be big when you get there, and it's going to get bigger every second that it takes you to be effective with the application of water. Okay, so yeah, but the new normal is normal. That's what you should expect to occur. I want you to show up there mentally ready to say, this thing is going to be a monster and I'm going to kill it. I don't want you surprised by the fact that it's a monster, right? I want you ready. I want you ready for the monster. And, you know, you can handle it. Man, water's an amazing thing. And firefighters do incredible things with it. And just practice. That's it.
All right, Phil, we're going to give this
All
a
right, so we're
shot.
going to give this a shot.
No, I
Okay.
got the echo, don't I?
Yeah, don't I? Yes, you do.
Hey, Sam, can you read Zachary Wendell's
Zachary
question to
Bell's
Phil?
question to Phil. When it comes to VEIS, what are some signs that once a window is broken, a room would flash, and there are signs in smoke that will tell you how much you have once you have entered the room?
Okay, so when we're talking about VEIS, right, what you're trying to figure out from the outside of the building is the critical factor that you are trying to figure out is whether or not the door to the room is open, right? Regardless of anything else, I expect that you're going to be ready to get in the window once you break it, right? When you do not take the window, this is me. This is how I would teach my people. Do not take the window until you're ready to go in the window. That would be the first thing. Now, I don't know if that flies in the face of the way your department does things. I'm just telling you, if I had one of my people was breaking the window before they were ready to go in it, I would be having a conversation with their battalion chief and their officer before we left that incident scene, right? That's not the way we trained it. That's not the way we expected it to be done. And we do expect it to be done, right? Searching is important. Okay, so now you need to know, is the door to the room open or closed, right? That's the critical factor. And so the sort of the easiest way to think about that is if you have high velocity smoke coming out of that room, then the smoke has access to that room, which means the door to that room is open, right? If it's screaming out around the edges of the window, the door to the room is open. Otherwise, that if the door is closed, that's a dead end room. Right now, will smoke be in there? Yes, but it will not be flowing with velocity through that space unless the door is open, right? If the door is closed, even with a significant fire, right? You're gonna have smoke in there. It's gonna be banked down. It's gonna be banked down to 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, maybe even all the way to the bottom, right? So when you look at the window, is it black? Is it sweated? Is it cracked? Is there smoke screaming out around the edges? If it is, the door to the room is open. Okay. Now, if the door to the room is closed, there's no issue. Get in there, right? I mean, when you open the window, you're not going to create a flow path. So you don't have any trouble, right? That's why we have the I in VEIS is like, if the door's open, you're supposed to close it. But if the door's already closed, maybe you want to check it to make sure that it's latched, right? That it's not just mostly closed. But then you're off to the races, man. You've got total autonomy in that room. I would argue that, I would say, in my opinion, you're operating at low risk, regardless of the fire condition. If the door to that room right now is closed, you're going to be operating at low risk, maybe moderate risk, but not high risk. And you can definitely search bases at moderate risk. Now, if the door to the room is open, you've got a very tough decision to make. When you break the window, you're letting the fire into the room. The smoke's already in there. The temperature's already in there. But when you break the window, you are letting the fire into that room. That's a choice you're making. And so now I want to have now we're talking about context. And this is why understanding how decision making works and why I spent so much time in my career on figuring out how decision making works, right? So you need to understand the context. Where's the engine? Are they having trouble? Are you on the floor above? Are you on the same floor? Are you going to the floor below? If you're searching a floor 1 room and the fire's on floor 2 and the door to the room's open, so, right, get in, close the door. You're below the fire. There's no risk to you, right? You got a whole floor between you and the fire problem. If you're on the floor above and the door's open and the engine's having trouble, then maybe you should not break the window, right? Maybe you should wait until the engine at least gets through the front door and has at least secured the stairwell before you break the window, right? If you look at the house and you go, this is a hoarder condition, I would go, don't ever break the window. Do something about the fire and the smoke, and then try to search that room. You're not going to go in the window and go close the door if it's a hoarder, right? But I cannot make the decision for you, and I cannot say these are the overs and the unders. What I'm telling you is you got to know, does the fire if I break this window, does the fire have access to this room? And am I in a position to get the door closed or to have the engine be effective before the fire runs me out of here? Because if you break the window and go in there and then the fire runs you out of there, whatever happens in that room is your responsibility, right? So it's a tough decision. I've seen people make great decisions. I've seen people come out of windows on fire, right? It's a tough call. Understand, is the door open when you get there? If it is, you got a very tough decision making. You might want to think about a couple of these other things. Where's the engine, right? What's the conditions of the house? Just take a second or two to think about what's going on. But I'll say it again. When you break that window, it's on, man. There's no dilly-dallying around, right? You made the choice to break the window and let the fire into that room, and you have a responsibility to get over there and close that door. That's on you, right? And so understand what you're trying to do, understand the conditions under which you're trying to do it, and make the best decision you can at the time. Now let's talk about context. How do you get this context into training? You watch videos and you say, here's conditions. Let's look at the conditions. Let's look at the volume, velocity, density, color. Let's look at what this window looks like before this firefighter breaks it. They break this window. Click, how long, right? Were they successful or unsuccessful? How long did it take? How long does it take you to get in the room and close the door? I don't know. Those things are not only agency specific, but personnel specific. Because I can tell you, engine X and engine Y show up in the incident scene, or ladder company X and ladder company Y. I have different expectations of performance based on who the officer is, what I've seen on the training ground, what the crew is riding there today, and I know all that stuff, and you need to know all that stuff, right? And I realize I'm not giving you, hey, here's the nice little bookends. What I'm saying is understand the decision you're trying to make, understand the context you're trying to make it in. Practice as much as you can getting the right visual images in your brain for what it should look like when I'm going to break the window with abandon, and when it should look like when I'm going to think twice about it. And that's going to get you 98% of the way to understanding how to make that decision at the moment. And you should practice not breaking the window sometimes, right? If every time you go to the top of the ladder, you break the window and dive in there, you're training yourself not to make a decision. That's a training scar. I could give you a litany of training scars that I've seen and that I've helped create in my organization. I'm not immune to these things, right? But I would call that a training scar. If every single time you do the exact same thing without thinking about it, you're creating training scars that can really, really bite you in the ass later. Well, I'm not sure if I should have said that word.
You're good. Phil, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, we're going to give this a shot. I unplugged my mic so I can see if we can do this.
Pretty bad.
That's
Turn
crazy.
your volume way down too, Rob, but I guess you're saying that it's not working for you.
I got my volume down.
Headphones.
Sam, I've got nothing left to turn down. I've got everything all turned down.
Your phone.
I can switch over to my iPad. You want to read him Cody Brooks' question? I'll switch over to my iPad.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the comments now too. Yeah,
Give me a second.
I like to call what Luke says here about creating, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Look, man, the best time to train is right now. The best time to take action is right now. The best time to do anything, and I'm as bad as anybody at doing things later, right? But you know, perfect is the enemy of good, right? Perfection is the same as paralysis. Some famous coach who I can't quote right now says, uh, perfection and paralysis are spelled exactly the same, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be effective, right? And so, do I want nozzle operators to understand how to water map excellently? Yes, I do, right? But I will take a nozzle operator who can get the line open over somebody who takes another 15 or 20 or 30 seconds to be perfect before they're ready to take action. Man, I mean, bullets are coming down range and you got to return fire, right? I mean, now do I want people to understand all that stuff? But like for me, the default, here's a question for the audience. I'll give the audience a question, right? I'm gonna give everybody a hydraulics question, right? We'll see how many people can answer it, right? Somebody out there, if you need to write numbers down and do a little math, that's okay too, right? What's the flow from an 1 3/4 nozzle in the closed position? What's the flow rate from a nozzle in the closed position? It's zero, man. It's zero. Don't be a zero, right? Your citizens, all the paid guys, but the volunteer guys too, right? They gave good hard-earned tax money. Like I pay my taxes. That money's important to me. I want to use it effectively, right? I don't want to waste it willy-nilly. And you're going to spend, I mean, a new engine is like $1.5 million. A new ladder company right now is like $2.4 million, right? That's a lot of chicken dinners at your local firehouse, and that's a lot. That's a lot of hourly wages from the people who live in your city. They're giving you that money. They're buying you $5,000 sets of bunker gear and $5,000 SCBAs and providing all of this beautiful training and equipment for you. And they're making a deal, man. And you swore an oath, right? To the best of your ability, you're going to save their lives. And you're the only one who's coming. And it matters if it takes too long. These things matter, right? And so simple solutions practiced regularly and implemented with speed and purpose. That's what we do. Simple solutions practiced regularly, implemented with speed and purpose. If it's complicated, figure out a way to make it simple. If it's taking too long, you got to practice more. If right, like this is not rocket science. It is challenging. It is difficult. It is rewarding as hell, right? I mean, it's the best job in the world, but man, you got yeah, like know your stuff. Go after it. Get some, right? I mean, it's so great when it's working right. And it's such a joy to be part of. I mean, I do miss that part of it, like that on the edge of excellence all the time. That's where you got to be.
All right, Phil, let's try this. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? I can. Still an echo.
There's still an echo. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a bunch of zeros in the. Are they talking about your echo or are they talking about my flow rate?
They're talking about your flow rate.
Does my nozzle leak? These guys are taking that seriously, Rob.
Sam, I don't know what else is left to do. I've switched everything. There is nothing else on other than my iPad and my headphones.
Did you leave and come back in, Robbie?
Yeah, I came in on my iPad.
Oh.
And now I'm using my headphones.
And who's this? Steve Mouch. Does your nozzle leak? Hey, man, brother, I can't help you with that. That sounds like a personal issue that you're going to have to deal with offline.
Well, Phil, do you want to kind of wrap this thing up a little bit so I can the echo's going to get annoying, I can tell.
Yeah,
so
one of the things that we go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
No, go ahead. When you're talking, there's no echo.
One of the things I just sort of broached was this deal that I stole from William McRaven, who was the national security advisor. He was the head of SEAL teams when they killed Obama. Almost everybody in the audience will know him because he's the make your bed guy. If you've watched the make your bed commencement address, that's William McRaven. His doctoral thesis is called Spec Ops, and I wrote a series of articles for engineering about it, and it's just the ideas that I just talked about. A simple plan, practice regularly, implemented with speed and purpose. And so when we talk about a simple plan, like I'm working with Dennis Laguerre on a project right now, Rob, and we're working for an agency and they have 5-inch hose, and the guy was asking me offline before Dennis was there what I thought. I said, well, I can't see a reason in your organization why you would need 5-inch hose. It takes longer to stretch. It takes longer to load. It's harder to pick up. Your unit of hour availability goes down. There's a bunch of reasons why 5-inch hose is not the right solution for many, many, many organizations who have it. Not all. I don't know about your organization, right? What I will tell you is 5-inch hose is a more complicated hose than 3-inch hose or 3.5-inch hose, right? There's a lot of reasons why it's more complicated. And so if we're going to switch something like that, what we want to look at is it more complicated? And if it is, what are we buying? What are we buying for the complication? Because every time you complicate something, you increase the opportunity for failure. Now, while I was in the Seattle Fire Department, we completely got rid of having a Y on. We used to do a stretch where we had a 2.5. We would put a Y and put 2 3/4 on it, right? Seems simple. And I can tell you, to the 33 companies across 4 platoons, right? That's 128 companies. On the drill ground, we experienced around a 15 to 18%. 15 was the lowest of the 4 platoons, 18 was the highest of the failure rate for that simple evolution. Now we got rid of the Y and just used a belt reducer to extend a 2.5 with 1 3/4. The failure rate went down to almost 0. As close, if I just change the people, I could solve, right? All we need is a little more practice and we can get rid of the failure rate. Now, you might have been able with practice to drive the failure rate of the Y down to 5 or 6 or 7%. Okay, right? I can drive the failure rate of the 2.5 with a belt reducer to 1 3/4 down to 0. And if you're going to ask me which one do I want on the fireground, I want the failure rate of 0 because it's the simplest solution. It's just whatever it is. Like if you're looking at your rig and you've got 10 pre-connects, you have probably 8 or 9 too many. How often are you training with them? I can just tell you, like we've had problems, man. Like we had problems with the way a hose was loaded. We had problems with the way it was deployed. We changed the entire hose bed to make it more simple, right? And if every item in your inventory, like ladders is another thing. I don't know what size ladders you need. I don't know what your built environment is. I don't know what kind of fires you go into on a regular basis. I don't know how big those buildings are. I don't know where your 90% solution for rescues is. I don't know, but you should know. And if a 26-foot 2-section ladder will do all that work, do the 90% work, 95% work, then that's a better ladder than the 28. Why? Because 20 is heavier, it's longer, it takes, like, is it a nominal amount more time? Yes, it's nominal, right? But last I heard, seconds matter. Right now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that you don't just switch from a, if you've got 26s, you don't just switch to 28s because they only happen to be $25 more, or they'll fit in the compartment. Those are not good reasons to change your equipment. Or the other way, like if your built environment, if your 90% solution is a 28-foot ladder, great, then get a 28. But then I'd have to ask, well, is what is the 26 an 89% solution and the 28 is a 90% solution? So what am I buying for the complication? 1%? Well, maybe that's not worth it, right? Because then there's a big jump. If I go 26, then I got to go 35, right? I don't know. I'm just saying this. If you take this emphasis on making everything as simple as possible and just think about things that way every single time, and understand that anytime you add a complication, you add failure, and failure is unacceptable. Failure does not meet the mission, right? And that's his book, Spec Ops. It's like $7 or $8 if you want to buy it. I think you can actually download it for free, right? The actual thesis itself is, I don't know, 25 or 30 pages. You read my 3 articles in Fire Engineering Magazine if you want to. Understanding how these things work and the repetitive nature of the training, and what's the context you're providing for training, so that you're not creating training scars. So you're not creating situations in which people are going to do the thing that they've been taught to do, and it's not the right thing. And those things happen even when you're trying hard, right? Let me just give one example of that, Rob. So let's say you're training, you've got recruits, you're training them to sling SCBAs, right? Something all recruits need to learn to do, whether they're volunteer or paid, doesn't matter. You have to be able to sling an SCBA in less than 1 minute in order to be NFPA 1001 qualified to be a firefighter 1, period, right? Now, just in my example, right, we have 12 weeks of academy, and the recruits are at the drill ground 40 hours a week. Of that 40 hours a week, they're spending close to 34 hours a week on the drill court, right? Not, they do apparatus checks and all that stuff. That's sometime in the morning. They have PT, right? We very rarely pull them off of the drill court. We practice putting up ladders and stretching hose and slinging masts and cutting roofs and doing all of the things that we need them to do when they go to the company. But one of those things is slinging masts. So that when they start slinging masts, what the normal, and was in the Seattle Fire Department, it wasn't when I left, it could have switched back. I don't know. I haven't been in the academy, right? Was to try to get people to be fast, be fast, be fast, be fast. The problem with that is they make mistakes. So we switched it. I've fired recruits more than you even want to know, right? Separation interviews suck, right? They suck. They suck for me. They suck for the recruit. They suck for the organization. We just wasted $150,000 of taxpayers' money, is what we did, right? For whatever reason. But people have to go sometimes. I don't have any problem with that. Okay, but I've never seen somebody fail out of drill school because they could not sling the mask in 1 minute, right? So if I have them sling it 10 times a day in a hurry, after 2 weeks, right, 4 days a week, 10 times a day, 40 times a week, 2 weeks they're going to have done it 80 times, and they're just barely getting to where sometimes they're under a minute, and sometimes they're doing it properly. So what I'm doing is I've given them 80 reps at doing it badly, and occasionally they get it right. Let's go back to the beginning. Every single time you do it, from the very first time, I don't care if it takes 10 minutes, put it on perfectly, perfectly every time. If they make a mistake, they go back in the cycle to the place where they were still doing it properly, and then they go through the area where they made the mistake and move on to the next. If it was a piano, right, you're going along with your chords, you make a mistake, you don't start there, you go back, right, to the chords that you already knew, and you play through the section where they made the mistake, so that every single time they're doing it perfectly. Now, at the end of 2 weeks, when they have 80 reps at this, they're going to be able to do it perfectly every time. And occasionally, they're going to get it in less than a minute. You give them 2 more weeks, they're going to get it perfectly every time, and they're always going to be under a minute. The other recruit that you train to be fast and in a hurry all the time, even at 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, yeah, maybe they can get 6 out of 10 correct and under time. But that means there's 4 times that they're getting it under time but incorrect. You created that problem for them by the way that you train them. And that goes, I don't care if you're taking a hydrant. Like, look, man, do it right. And if they understand what you're trying to teach them, understand what the steps are, right? And if they make a mistake, stop. Okay, here's the mistake you made. Here's the proper way to do it. Let's go back. Let's reset back to 2 or 3 steps before, and then have them work through it. Does that take more time in the first few weeks? Yes. Is it frustrating? Yes. What's the objective? The objective is to get somebody who can do it perfectly every time, so that when I send them to the company, they're not gonna be, you know, at the worst fire of their life, which could be a tiny fire. It's still the worst one of their life, of their career. Highest possible stress factor. I need them to be able to do it perfectly. That's what I need. That's my goal. That's my objective. And it's so easy to create these training cards. If you don't understand what it means to understand what the context is of the training and how the brain works under these circumstances, you just have to learn that stuff, and you have to understand that the objective is not to do it quickly, sometimes right. The objective is to do it right every time, and eventually, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Eventually, by the time they get out of drill school, do they have to be able to do it smooth and fast? Yep. And they'll
Yeah,
get there. Right?
yeah, Stephen.
And they'll get there, right, Robbie?
Yeah, yeah, Stephen Kaiser just posted in one of the messages, consistency is key. So I'm not echoing right now. All right, guys. So what we're doing is we're working this puzzle out, and it looks like that Phil's mic is the one that is actually bringing in the echo, and I think it was Chad. Was that who it was? Oh, the chat. Relentless rejects, and everybody in the chat has figured out what the problem is. So we've narrowed this down, and we think it's Phil's mic, and we're going to put him on a headset, and we think that'll help everything out. I appreciate you guys' patience working through this problem, and I appreciate what Phil did, because he basically took the show and just ad-libbed, or not necessarily ad-libbed, but just he jammed for a little bit, as us musicians would say. He was jamming, and everything was good. So, Phil, can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. I just hope there's no more echo.
Yeah, everything sounds good. All right, so I appreciate everything you did, Phil. I don't know if you got to hear me talking to the audience. You were like this master jam session and taking care of stuff while Sam and I were working through this whole issue. So you were leading into it. You already talked about McCraven and his stuff, and you. I just want to talk a little bit about your article that you just did this year on fire engineering. I think it was a 3-part article just recently, and you were applying McRaven stuff to the American Fire Service. And you want to hit just a little bit on that?
Yeah, Robbie, that's what we covered when we were in the dead zone there. I basically covered all that stuff.
Awesome.
Simple plan, practice regularly, execute it with speed and purpose. And speed, I'll just add one more thing. Because that stuff I covered, but I kind of didn't talk about speed and purpose. Speed is a function of training. It's a function of repetition. That's it. There is no substitute for repetition, right? Purpose is understanding the mission, right? It's the innovation, the dedication, the willingness of your people. There's never a fire ground ever that goes off without a hitch. Your people's ability to adjust and adapt and overcome friction, right? That's what we're talking about is friction. That's the military term is friction, right? There's friction on the fire ground, right? I don't mean just in the hoses. I mean stretching the hose, putting up the ladder. I mean, the grass is deep. There's overhead power lines, right? There's cars in the way, right? That's all friction. This ability, right? The understanding the mission and the purpose, your people's purpose on that scene is what overcomes that friction so that you can achieve the mission objectives, which is to save lives.
Awesome. That was awesome. So since we're already on, I'm sure he's going to be part of your books, but what book or books would you recommend to firefighters, Phil?
Yeah, McCraven's book is definitely one of them for sure. Like I said, it's pretty cheap and easy to come by, and like I said, I think there's online version that you can just download. The other one, I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned this, but Eric Roden's book Fire Psych, which I actually don't know if that's in print anymore. But Fire Psych is a book if you want to understand how the brain works under stress. That's a really good book to give you the layout of that. If you want to know how decisions are made under stress, anything by Gary Klein would do that. And one thing I know I've heard on the scrap before is MCDP 1, which is war fighting. Yeah, it's a great document, and it's great in many ways because it's so simple. If you think about the entire Marine Corps warfighting doctrine being in a book this big and it's like 30 pages long, like that's a mastery right there. The guy that wrote it, John Schmidt, I consider him a friend of mine. Now he doesn't get credit because he wrote it for the Marine Corps, right? But he's the guy who wrote it. He wrote it for the Commandant, and they published it. It's MCDP 1 or FM1, I think is what it's called now. But there's another one, and that's MCDP 7. And that talks about training and preparation. And so it lays out what I think are some really good, simple principles. If you want a book that's going to give you a lot of value in a short period of time and you understand how mission-directed and mission-focused training can be accomplished, I think that's just a really powerful book that you can add. And I'm sure that they're available used. I got 2 or 3 of them here with some lieutenant commander's name on it from some base somewhere, right? And I hand them out to people sometimes too. I do that I've given away probably 30 of McRaven's books. That's how highly I believe it is. I'd give away a fire psych book, but I haven't been able to find one in any time in the last few years. Maybe I know Eric's probably been on the scrap, I would guess. I don't know for sure, but those are some books I would recommend.
Yeah,
maybe out of the standard repertoire.
that always goes out. And one of the things that we didn't get a chance to cover early on, and one of the projects that we've worked on together, I'm part of your project, is a decision making, tactical decision making group that you piece together with a bunch of command officers from all around the country. And the element how that came about was through the military, right? You were doing it, you became a part of what the military was doing in these tactical decision making games, and then kind of applied it to the American Fire Service and what we were doing, which I totally appreciate being a part of. I got a ton out of it, and I still do, even though I'm not on the job anymore. You want to talk a little bit about kind of what you do and how that all came about, because that kind of leads into what you were doing in the decision making side of it, and you've already talked about the Marine Corps warfighting document.
Yeah, we've definitely covered where you spoke. So on the tactical decision side, um, I do scenarios, but they're not scenarios like anybody's probably thinking of right now. They're called tactical decision games, and they were first put in the. So let me start earlier in the decision gaming. Uh, they actually have multiple books on decision gaming and all that kind of stuff, but uh, the Prussians first started using tactical decision games, like 1500 years ago or something, right? If you think about Halo, where it's red versus blue, that comes from the Prussian practice of using two armies in their decision games, one red and one blue, right? So that's how far that stuff goes back. But the tactical decision games in sort of the modern iteration were created. Another thing that was created by John Schmidt. He was an acolyte of John Boyd, and if you haven't heard John Boyd's name, the OODA loop is John Boyd's thing. The OODA loop is it's an interesting decision making theory. It's much broader than most people in the fire service recognize, but let's not go down that rabbit hole. We can talk about that for another 15 minutes. So John started putting these things in the Marine Corps Gazette. It's a simple tactical problem. He gave him a map. He gave him a situation report. Here's where the enemy is. Here's where you are. Here's the troops that you have. He did them in different sizes: company, battalion, squad. And he created these things and just would put them in the Marine Corps Gazette, and they would go out to everybody in the Marine Corps. And Marines of any rank in any billet anywhere in the Corps could write in their solution to the problem. And then with the next month, right? So we're talking about the 80s. This is well before the internet started. They would publish, 5 or 6 or 7 of the responses and analyze them and give them, give some context and sort of as a learning tool. And then they would publish the next one, right? So John was doing this in the Marine Corps Gazette, but he was also doing it in person at the Pentagon with a bunch of other young Marine Corps officers, and they were challenging each other in this environment where they're in the room, there's no rank, right? So if you're in the room, you're in the game. And the way I run mine when I'm online, I think it's engaging as anything I've seen in online training. And Rob, maybe you can speak to that, but I give you a problem, have you solve it, have you give your solution in radio language as if you're on this incident scene, and then once we put that problem on the board so everybody can kind of see the map of what's happening, who's parked, who's positioned, where lines are stretched, who's doing what, and then the other people in the group get to go, well, that's going to be, stretching 3 lines up a stairwell. Have you ever done that before? No, I've never done 3 lines up a stairwell. Well, you might want to try that, because we outlawed that in our fire department because we found that 2 lines is the maximum, right? And oh my God, I would have never thought to do that. And I've done this. I have a group of chief officers that I do this with, which Rob, you're part of. And then I also have done them through Fire Nuggets for a cadre of chief officers and a cadre of company officers. One of the beautiful things that happened when we were doing the company officer ones, right? Sessions, there's 4 sessions, you sign up for, the dates are known, all that stuff. And these things take about probably about 10 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes to set up, and then we'll talk about them for 60 to 70 minutes, no problem after that. And one of the beautiful things that happen with the lieutenants is that some of the agencies had this problem where they couldn't be in the offensive mode if they didn't have 4 people. And one of the other company owners says, "Oh, we had that same problem, but we got city legal to buy off on the fact that we can do it in commercial in multifamilies. In multifamilies, we can deploy regardless of how many people we have on scene. We can deploy because there's people at risk." And the other people in the other company officers are like, "Oh my God, will you send me a copy of because the one company was like, we're going, and some of the other ones like, oh man, I wish we could go, but we really can't do that, right?" But you learn so much. I mean, Rob, why don't you talk a little bit about what you think the value is of those exercises?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that I remember the most that had a huge impact on me and my counterpart that was in the East Battalion, Christian Demanda. Um, uh, you had us at a commercial fire at I think it was a recycling plant, and we were all to be in a defensive position, and we worked on, well, what's that sound like? What when you tell everybody that they're not going inside, what does that look like? What does that sound like? And that turned into an hour plus conversation on how to communicate and how to build trust and position with your people on so that they know exactly what your intent is when, even though you've called a defensive position, well, where is that? Is that where's the collapse zone? Where is, what's the threshold where, we're trying to flow the large lines? And so I just remember that. I remember we had one of the guys from Clark County on a fire, the fire simulation that we were doing, and he's a battalion chief here in Clark County in Vegas, and how to hit the fire from so many different angles, and that the interesting thing was in his system they didn't use the second BC to create a division. They wanted the second BC to be support to the initial BC or the IC, and that throws everything off because the fire was in such a situation that how it was laid out, and you're going, man, I really need another division, but they can't, in their system they can't do it. Where in other systems we're going like, no, that's my priority, is to send a tactical boss to create another division and give me another set of eyes and attack it from a different angle. So I loved it, and I mean I miss it. It's been a busy summer, but I miss the tactile, and when we get back to doing them again through the fall and the winter, I look forward to it. And I'm not even going on calls anymore. So I absolutely love what you're doing, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that you're doing it on Fire Nuggets and you make it available so that others can come in on it and do it. So I think it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I take it to organizations too, and so if I go to a place, I'm not going to do a simulation in Snow County where you were, Rob, when we did simulations there for your group of chief officers. I'm not giving you engines with 6 people on them and unlimited staffing. I'm giving you rigs with this, because it's funny how when you start talking about tactics, people will say, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and then you're like, which person is going to do that thing, right? In the abstract environment of being in a tactics discussion in a classroom, or right, like if you don't have to account for every single person and what they're actually doing, and you complicate it, you give somebody 2 assignments, right? That happens a lot, especially for chief officers. So give companies 2 assignments, and then I'll press them and say, okay, which is the most important assignment, right? Or I'll ask one of the other chiefs, what do you think is, based on his order, what do you think is the most important assignment? Do you think is that correct? Right? Is he interpreting your order correctly? Like, you put him in, do this and this, but like, which one are they going to do first, right? Even if you have OGs that says companies should do this and this and this, like if you don't prioritize those in order, then your company officer can pick any one of those things and be within the operating guide. That one of the difficult things about writing operating guides is making them just restrictive enough, right? Just enough control, but not too much. And it's easy to try to over control something that you don't have any control over, man. It's on fire, and we're going to put it out. And sometimes the second lane needs to go inside. Sometimes it needs to go to the house next door, and sometimes it needs to be on. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
If you've got 100 people coming to your fire, you can lay out every single thing that every person is going to do, because you can have a bunch of things in there that don't need to be done. But if you only got 6 people coming or 8 people coming, you that stuff needs to be prioritized, because you got to do things. If you got an army, you can do things sequentially. If you've got a big army, you can do things sequentially. If you've got a small army, you got to do things. Uh, I'm sorry. If you got a big army, you can do them simultaneously.
Yeah.
If you've got a small army, you have to recognize that you have to do these things sequentially, right? Because a company can't stretch a line and search. A beautiful thing they do in Walla Walla, Rob, is it's a given. It's a given that the first line is going to get to the fire room, knock the hell out of it, and then they're going to search. Like, they don't have to say it on the radio. They don't have to communicate this stuff on the radio. As soon as they say that they got that water in that room, they're searching, and everybody knows they're searching. Now, if they get more people and they can come in and help search, that's great too. But in other systems, right, that company's going to put the fire out, and the next company's going to do the searching, and you got plenty of people to do everything. In their system, they got 2 dudes inside, right?
Yeah.
2 dudes inside, 1 dude outside.
To talk more about the tactical decision making games that we play, we've got battalions and command officers from all across the country, from urban FDNY to small suburban departments. And Danny Sheridan, who's a battalion chief in the FDNY, and we were doing one of these scenarios, and Phil had set up, and it had tenders, tankers, whatever you want to call them, depends on which part of the country you're from. And Danny Sheridan, in my best Danny voice, I just can't wrap my mind around this, because he's got 2-man tenders and 3-person engine companies and ladder companies, and he's got, on the first alarm, he has what he would have on this first truck and first engine arriving, and it goes back to, like, what your environment is, what you were raised in, what you get accustomed to, just to kind of tie to, like, experience with roof operations. And I grew up in the modern environment, the engineered environment. I would much rather be on an engineered roof with fire and smoke and everything below me than to be on a 120-year-old building in FDNY that was conventional, just because I feel like I have more feel for that. I know what I'm looking for. It's my environment, versus being in something that I don't have a feel for. I don't know when it I don't know how to read it as well. And it just goes to the point of, like, when we're making decisions, it's really important to understand where you come from and what you do. So you look like you got a comment.
Yeah, I can't add on to that, Rob. I mean, all tactics is local, and
it is.
When I was a battalion, and when I was a deputy, right? So if you're a company officer, you know who's on your crew today, right? When I was a battalion, when I was a deputy, I mean, I'm looking at the roster. I know who those officers are, right? I know who every officer is, right? I know most of the people. I can't say I knew all of the people well, because it's a big place, right? Every time, you got 30 recruits come every 6 months, right? You're only getting 7 of them, and they only stay there for 6 weeks at a time, right? But I know who the officers are. And, like, here's another very simple thing. I could, even now, probably, I've been out of the game 5 years. I know you could do this, Rob. I could probably take any company from any organization and take them out to the drill court And in 2 minutes, I can tell you the only thing I need to know. I don't care what the exercise is. Take an engine company and they're going to stretch lines and get a supply, do a couple other things over the course of 5 or 6 minutes. It's going to take me 2 minutes or less to know the only thing I need to know about that company. Do they train regularly? Because it's obvious. It's obvious the company that trains regularly and the company that does not. And I can have company evals with 46 check boxes, and I'll tell you, Rob, companies can hit every single checkbox perfectly and be completely incompetent, right? Uh, I mean, if I had my world, I'd have two boxes on a company eval, acceptable and unacceptable. And I don't need any more check boxes now. I know what it looks like when people know their business. I mean, at least in the Seattle Fire Department, I did 5 years ago, right? Maybe I don't now. I you know maybe I'd still be pretty good at that if I took the company out to the drill court. But uh, your company, I'm guarantee there's a lot of company officers in the vigilantes, right? Your company, your responsibility. Doesn't matter if your chief trains, doesn't matter if the deputy trains, doesn't matter if the department trains. If you're an individual on a company and your company doesn't train, this is also in my articles, the McRaven series, you have a responsibility to train. You have a responsibility, right? The individual is responsible for their own skills. The company officer is responsible for their own skills and the company skills. The battalion is responsible for their own skills. Running a fire is a skill set, right? And I'm not even talking about managing people. I'm talking about running a fire. It's a skill set. You got to practice, you got to train, you got to do all that stuff, and you're responsible for the company officers and you're responsible for the firefighters, right? So this like, oh yeah, my officer doesn't really like to train. Well, two, you got one choice, and that's you got to train. Now, ideally, uh, you train yourself and you get yourself in a position with somebody who will train, or you start training yourself and you influence the people around you in a gentle fashion over the course of a long period of time to come on board, right? One of the struggles that I had, and I don't know if you had this, Rob, but I was a little less enthusiastic about taking time with people when I first started, and I was frustrated with people who didn't train, and if the training wasn't organized well, it frustrated me, and I misbehaved sometimes, and it just took me a while to figure out that, like, look, man, you just 1 pound of pressure, right? 1 pound of pressure over a long period of time. And if that means you have to move up in your organization, then do what it takes, man. Do what it takes. When I got to the Seattle Fire Department, there were very few companies who trained regularly, and not because of me, but by the time I left, there were very few companies who didn't train regularly. Now, that's over the course of 3 decades, right? 3 decades, and I'm not claiming credit for that. That's something that happened. Uh, I don't even know how it happened. I know I had a tiny piece of it, but that organization was there 100 years before I got there, and they'll be there 1,000 years from now. And somewhere along the line, you got to do your part, and your part isn't, at least in my mind, it's not running a construction business. It's not, running a home loans. It's not like, look, I took time with my family. I did that stuff, but the job is important. It's important work. Do it well. Be proud, right? Do all that stuff because it matters, man. And when you look back at it, like I am now, and you can see just little pieces of success, just means a lot. And so if you're young, if you're new, if you're moving through that middle section, man, keep going and be really smart about it and just apply a pound of pressure over a long period of time. What's Aaron Fields say? Water boils from the bottom.
Water
Right?
boils from the
Water
bottom.
boils from the bottom.
Yep. And I would say 10 pounds of pressure 100% of the time. And that's how you get stuff to move. All right, Chief Josie, you ready for the 5 questions for firefighters
Sure, my brother.
version 3? All right. So, question number 1, Chief, what is the skill that has carried you through through your fire service career?
It's a mental skill, Rob. It's curiosity. And
Ooh.
I'm telling you, you got to be curious. You got to be curious about why things are happening, how they happen. That fire went well. Why did it go well? It went poorly. Why did it go poorly? And not just that, but that's what encapsulates a lifelong learner is this ability, is this desire to understand things, right? And it's funny because I did a presentation for there's a whole group of people called the Naturalistic Decision Making Association, right? So they're cognitive psychologists, and that's what they do is they study how people make decisions under time pressure, like we do, right? Recognition prime decisions. It's all the outgrowth of Gary Klein's work. There's a whole field of cognitive psychology, right? And I went to their conference, and I had this. The one question I wanted to ask and find out the answer to was, how do you get people to be curious? And the curious thing about that question to that group was they all looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. I had been across so many people in my career that had zero or near zero curiosity, right? Of course, they're cognitive psychologists engaged in the world of figuring things out. Everybody they know is curious. They don't even understand the question. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. You got to be curious, man. You about whatever it is that drives you, and if it's in this profession is something that should drive you right to the heart.
Oh, Phil, I'm looking because I got 2 monitors going on here. You got max points, max points, max points, max points. Phil Joe's definitely nerd out, and I would just tie the bow on that. I love watching Ted Lasso, and one of the things that Ted Lasso has as part of his leadership stuff is be curious, don't be judgmental, and that is just leads right to what you're talking about. It's like, before you place judgment, look and try to understand things and be curious about things, and I think you'll be a better person for it. All right.
All the way back to Epictetus, brother. You can't learn something you think you already know.
Perfect. All right, question 2. This goes back to this question kind of came in later on, but it's Jobtown. You're en route. You're responding, and you got to think of that scene from Backdraft. And I know you've been on the job long enough. You actually saw Backdraft like I did in the theater, and not a VHS tape But in that scene in Backdraft, Schmidt is his name. He's the engineer on Engine 17. They're just heading out, and young McCaffrey came in late into the call, and they're giving him shit in the back. And Schmidt drops in a tape as they're going to a fire, and they're listening to music, which could be a trivia question on what song were they listening to. But what's your song that you're playing en route to a fire, Phil?
Well, I'm actually from the Ryan Selig school, where I'm talking about the work we're going to do, but I'm going to play the game. And there's only one band, Rob. There's only one band in the whole world. There's only one band. It's the power trio from Canada, commonly known as Rush. And there's only one song that. Well, I actually have 2 songs that fit this bill, but the best one is "Working Man." That guitar right up front, man. And we're working, man. We're working men. That's what we are. We're blue collar to the bone, and we get our hands dirty, and we do God's work. And I'm a working man, Rob. Always will be, and that's my song.
Oh, I love it. And that's one of my favorite groups. And trivia question, what other 3-person band came out of Canada around that time period that was real popular too? But Working Man.
Are you asking me about Triumph?
Oh, well, see, you already know. You're answering your own question. And I don't even think that we've had Working Man on here. I'll have to see if Sam remembers But nope, Sam's shaking his head. I can see him in the screen. So working man, that is a first here on the scrap.
And there's a
And Sam says
oh
it's the
man, if
first
you
rush.
want another one, yeah, if you want another one, look up Driven. That's another good one. But all the Gen Xers and millennials are rapidly searching a band called Rush.
Yeah, it's funny. And what's great, Phil, you probably don't know unless you've watched a lot of the scraps. There is actually on Spotify, they have an actual playlist for Firehouse Vigilance, and so all of these go into the playlist. So that'll get entered into the playlist. All right, question 3: what is your favorite fire service tradition?
Well, it's not just my favorite fire service tradition; it's also my favorite personal tradition. That's family dinner. There's in my firehouses we had on Easter, Christmas, etc. Families come in, big spread, everybody's together. I think and obviously, I mean, look at my thing here, right? Northgate Station 31. More often than not interrupted. But the act of sitting down together to break bread, nothing more important. Right? Nothing more important than that. I mean, in my mind, and I'll tell you, I made a mistake, Rob. When I was a brand new lieutenant, we were just a 3-person house, and I just didn't think it was that important, and so we didn't do it. And I regret that to this day. I think it would have made that company a better company, and provided better service to the citizens if I'd have made sure we were having a family dinner every night.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. I mean, 2 retired guys here. There's one thing that I miss the most about being on the job. It's the dinners, it's the lunches, it's the time at the kitchen table. And every retiree that I've talked to that is into the job and really enjoyed their careers, they'll say the same thing. And man, I my organization was making a change at the time, and we, being a smaller department, we didn't do crew dinners, and where I was working at the time, we started to implement it, and of course we got made fun of, but it's one of those nice things that you see. The department has changed, and now my organization, almost every single firehouse has got crew dinners going on, and it's good to see. And I think it's an important one. I feel, man, you got a bunch of max points on this. Somebody even popped in about the rush and going back to is a working
Dan
fire
Bender's
band.
just wrong. Dan Bender's just wrong. There's only one band, and that band is Rush.
But you got max points on that. Okay, question
Good.
number 4. Now, this question we had to put on a 1-minute timer. I only got to answer it once, and I was well prepared for it, so I ended up having it all written out. But we had to put this on a timer because there is just so many angles you can go with this, and guys were taking their time, and then they've got honorable mentions, and so there is no honorable mentions. So the question is, who are the 4 people you'd put on your Mount Rushmore of the American Fire Service? Ready? Go.
Okay, so Tom Brennan's up there, personal friend of mine, and just blessed to have spent some time with him. When I first went to FDIC, he literally was taking Steve Bernoco and I around by the hand and taking us everywhere there. And I can't thank him enough for that, even though he's passed now. I put on that list, they're still alive, but I put Claude Harris and Bonnie Beers on that list. Claude Harris was the first African-American firefighter in the Seattle Fire Department. Bonnie Beers was the first female firefighter in the Seattle Fire Department. And they both took a load of abuse and rose above and did wonderful things for my organization, including Claude promoting me to lieutenant. And I always thank him for giving me the opportunity to be part of that organization. And they stand on high water with me. The last one is, people are going to know this, it's Wagner Dodge. He was the crew chief at the Man Gulch fire, where 13 firefighters died in Montana. Not too far from where I am, probably only about, it's close in Montana, so it's probably only about an 18-hour drive. if you know what the 10 watch out conditions are for wildland firefighting, I live in wildland country now. I know this much about wildland firefighting. Here's what I know: when they tell me to leave, I leave. Right? But the impact of that fire on that part of the fire service, I think, cannot be underestimated. And I would put all 13 of them up there, but Wagner Dodge did not die that day, and he did not die because he set a backfire. And nobody ever thought of it, nobody ever talked about it. He just did it, right? And so just a little outreach, right? That says, hey, there's more to this service. There's always more. There's always more to learn.
Yeah, I had to study that fire back in college. And I believe he did create the watch out stuff and his actions, and he was the one that creation of all that. Did he not, Phil? Did you say that?
Yeah. So I don't know if he created them, but I think the Forest Service created them as a result of that fire. That's how I remember it. And so that carries forward 100 years later. The lessons learned at that fire are implemented on the very first day of training. Like, I've got a nephew who just spent the summer in his first summer doing wildland firefighting in Montana, and I guarantee you, I haven't seen him yet, but he's been gone all summer, right? He's been deployed, and with a big every picture I see of him, he has a huge smile on his face and smoke in the background, right? I'm so jealous of him right now. But I'm sure one of the first days he learned those watch outs, and you could track all those go back to Wagner Dodge. There's a great book called Young Men at Fire, written by Norman McLean. Most people would know him because he wrote A River Runs Through It, which was, starred Brad Pitt, right? But definitely, like I said, there's always more to learn, and memories and things that happened that shouldn't have happened, and whatever we can do to remember those things and just leap forward as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I met Tommy Brennan before he had passed, and he was obviously he's considered one of the biggest firefighters in the American Fire Service. I got a chance to meet Chief Harris when I was years ago, but I never got to meet what was her name again?
Bonnie Beers.
Bonnie Beers. I never got to meet Bonnie, but I think anytime where we're looking at firefighters that have had to endure most, and people like Claude Harris and Bonnie, that's awesome. So, last question: heavy fire in searchable space. Would you rather be assigned to the nozzle or first in on VES?
I gotta believe this is a no-brainer, man. I want that search. I just think that there's I've searched I don't know how many times I searched for every victim I've found, because I've only found a couple of victims, but when it happens, there's nothing like it. And in my mind, this is the way I think about things: is that engine work is linear and truck work is circular. And that's sort of a I'm sure if Dennis is listening, Dennis would go, yeah, that makes sense to me, right? It's an abstract, right? But engine work is point to point, and truck work is wherever necessary. And I spent plenty of time on engines. I taught engines in drill school, a couple of classes. Every time I got promoted, I went to an engine, but I always found my way back to the truck. And I really like the freedom and the ability to act that the truck provided, and doing VES is one of those things. Doing searches above the fire floor, doing on the floor above, all that stuff to me is just, it's rock and roll, baby. And Sam, I didn't mean to insult you. He was a little insulted. I thought, no, I get it. The only reason my kids know Rush is because I introduced them to it. But my wife knows it well.
Well, Phil, I got to say, I was curious which way you were going to go with it. I knew you worked a good amount of time on the truck, but everything that I've done with you in decision making and I thought maybe for a second there you were going to want to grab that nozzle and take care of the incident. But I agree with you. I think that's a good way of looking at how trucks and engines are a little bit different. I mean, one of the things that I always said about why I enjoy my time working on the ladder truck and why I feel like that was what really interested me and motivated me. It was purely that it was never like this, then that, then this. It was always you're revolving around a problem and you're trying to do what is needed for that specific moment. And it was always changing. It never seemed like it was, one next thing. So, all right. Well, that is a wrap, man. That's officially Scrap 260 in the books. Phil Jost, I want to thank you for being on this evening. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and get any more information, how do they go about doing that, Phil?
Well, my website is ignitionpointtraining.com. You can find me on YouTube. You have to search my full name, Philip Jost, or if you type in Phil Jost, and the art of reading smoke, you'll find I got 100 reading smoke videos up there. They're somewhere between 6 and 15 or 20 minutes. And what I try to focus on is the same things that I'm teaching in the class, right? So the idea that I have for my class when I teach it is I'm going to teach you how to train. That's what I'm going to do in that day is I'm going to teach you how to train. And then I'm going to provide that asset for you to train on a regular basis. You're not going to, clearly you can learn a lot in one day of reading smoke. And I took the reading smoke curriculum a bunch of times and I learned a lot from Dave. But just like any other skill, reading smoke is a skill, and to have that skill, you have to practice that skill. And so they can find me pretty easily, ignitionpointtraining.com. My email is phil@ignitionpointtraining.com, or they can reach me on YouTube, Facebook, the Instagram, all of the things that are connected to the tube that is the internet. I don't do X, but there you go.
Yeah, that's everything but X. I love it. All right, everybody, that's a wrap for us tonight. Vigilantes, we're going to be doing the after party. If you want to be a part of the Vigilantes, you can join. Go to Firehouse Vigilance. It's through Patreon, and we will be going to an after party. All the Vigilantes are going to be there, or at least those that are here tonight. If you want to be like the cool kids, like I said, go to firehousevigilance.com, and through Patreon, you can get into the Vigilantes. Sam's going to be posting out the link here momentarily. Phil and I already have the link, so we're ready to go. Scrap 261. There will be, that's on Thursday, August 22nd. So coming up here in a few days, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. There is another guest host. It is not me. And the guest on the scrap is going to be Chief Brett Stidham from Arlington, Texas. So that's it. Let's get to the after party. Phil, I'm looking forward to running into you there. Audience, thank you so much for everything. You are the ones that make this such a great show. We love you all. Thank you so much. And remember, mutts don't scrap. Mutts don't scrap. I hope the tones stay silent unless it is burning. Be smart out there. See you later.